CQ, CQ, CQ. This is Kilo 5 Charlie Lima Mike, and you are listening to the Everything Ham Radio podcast. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Everything Ham Radio podcast. This is episode number 3, and today we're going to be talking about Project 25. Now, I'm going to take a little side note here before we go on and actually talk to what we're going to talk about. I originally recorded this episode talking about both Project 25 and digital mode radio. As I got done recording it, I had not yet finished talking about everything that I wanted to talk about, but it had gotten like 45, almost 50 minutes long, and I still had another 10 minutes to talk. So I decided to break it up and do one episode of Project 25 and one episode of Digital Mode Radio. So this also got me to thinking, I've ran into this issue before. When I first started, the episode number 1 on D-Star also ran a little long on the first recording. So what I'm thinking about is going to a weekly podcast instead of a bi-weekly podcast. Now, being how my goals of this podcast is to keep it about 30 minutes, I think that's probably going to be best. But I tell you what, let me know in the comments below on the show notes what y'all think about it. Would y'all like me to go to a weekly podcast or remain as a bi-weekly podcast? You can find the show notes for this episode at everythinghamradio.com/podcast/3. That's the number 3. So, let's go ahead and get started. Project 25 is, I would say, probably the public safety version of the Yaesu system fusion system. And the reason I say that is because P25 can do both analog and digital, and it uses the same C4FM protocol as the System Fusion. So, that's why I say it's about the same. Now, P25 started back in the 1980s, probably the late 1980s. And it came about because, much like an amateur radio, the frequencies were getting few and far between that you were able to get. Now, imagine the way that we are in amateur radio, the usage that we have, and multiply it by like 10. Because, there's going to be 10 agencies pretty much for every one club that has a repeater, or 10 agencies per repeater, per amateur radio repeater. So, frequencies were few and far between. Now, this is using the full 25 kilohertz, so they were looking for some way of getting more frequencies. So, back in 1988, the U.S. Congress directed the Federal Communications Commission to send out an inquiry for recommendations from users and manufacturers to improve the communication system. And in October of 1989, APCO Project 25 came into being. Now, this group of people that started this were made up of the Association of Public Safety Communications Officials International, National Association of State Telecommunications Director, National Telecommunications and Information Administration, National Communications System, National Security Agency, and the Department of Defense. So they all came together and they made up this Project 25 system. But it still really didn't take off for another, probably 12 years or so. During the 1990s, people were really slow to move to the system because of the price. The price for a handheld unit that had P25 was like $2,000 to $3,000, and then mobile radios were like $3,000 to $5,000. They were outrageously expensive, and people just couldn't afford that, or agencies couldn't afford that. If you have 20 officers or 20 cars, you have to have a handheld for each officer. You got to have a radio in each car. You have to have one in your dispatch center. Your one at your police station. It's a lot of money, and people just couldn't afford that. Well, prices have come down since then, so that's a good thing. But even still, there's certain stipulations that come across or that are pertaining to the P25 system. The P25 system is a closed system. It's not like System Fusion or D-Star, where it uses the internet to connect to other areas. The P25 system is totally secured, totally separate network. So, in order to have this totally separate network, there had to be hubs. And here locally where I live, just south of Fort Worth, Texas, a city out to the west, to the northwest of me, named Weatherford, or Parker County, I'm not sure which has that actual thing. They actually went out and spent in the neighborhood of like $5 million to get all the equipment, to get all of their officers' radios and new dispatch radios and hardware and stuff like that. And they actually became the hub for all of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. So now anytime an agency in the surrounding area goes to P25, they pay Weatherford for the use of the hub and are connected to this network. Well, just like with D-Star, you can connect to anywhere else on the network if you want to, if you have the equipment for it. We don't have the equipment for it, but it is possible. So, anyways, like I said, the price of it has come down quite a bit. But even still, none of this, none of the agencies really came across until after 9/11. And I'm talking about 9/11/2001, when the World Trade Centers were hit. Shortly after that, when the Homeland Security was formed and the National Incident Management System was put into place, one of the requirements of the NIM system was interoperability. And what I mean by that is, like, Agency 1 and Agency 2 a lot of times couldn't talk to each other or had issues talking with each other. Well, one of the stipulations of NIMS is that Agency 1 and Agency 2 could talk to each other without any issues. So, 4 or 5 years or so after NIMS and the whole Homeland Security thing started, they put a stipulation in where you had to be P25 compliant. And in order to be P25 compliant, you have some kind of P25 radio or some kind of interconnect between the P25 system and your analog radio or whatever. Most of the time, people just went out and bought the radios for some reason. We had an awesome, really good coverage system here where I live. It had great coverage, covered 95% of our county with handhelds. And then we decided to go to the P25 system, and it dropped it down to like 50% coverage. We actually had to put up like 2 other towers and tweak a whole bunch of the settings and stuff like that to get what we have now. So, it's kind of a win-win or no-win situation, so to speak. So let's talk a little bit about the pros and the cons of the P25 system. The P25 system, much like System Fusion and D-Star, the audio is much clearer. It does have the digital IDs, just like D-Star and System Fusion have. You put your call sign in your radio. When you transmit, it digitally transmits your call sign. Same thing with P25. It also has a module that you can buy with your radios to where you have the automatic location functions, and it also has the data transfer. I don't think it's used as much as it would in like D-Star or System Fusion would be for us amateurs, but it does have that capability. The downside to P25 is that as of 2011, there have been several reports that were written and given to a conference at the time, where it showed how P25 was really susceptible to both harmful interference and intentional interference. One report stated that the P25 system could effectively be jammed with a $30 child's toy. Of course, it had to be modified, but $30 is going to jam a $3,000 handheld, and the child's toy was transmitting only a fraction of the power that the handheld was. So, you're talking about 5 watts of a handheld transmitter and a $30 child's toy that transmits a quarter watt is going to be jamming that handheld, and that's just ridiculous to me. Basically, what it amounted to is that the forward error correcting system that it has in place requires, so many packets to be transmitted. Well, if this child toy is able to block like 25% of that error correcting signal, then the transmission won't go through. And that's exactly what happened. Like I said, these reports are back from 2011, so I'm hoping by now this has been fixed. So, P25 is a good system. It has gotten a lot better in my personal experience. It has gotten a lot better from when it started. Like I said, P25 is primarily used in the public safety fields, things like law enforcement, EMS, fire, Homeland Security, FBI, stuff like that. It is mainly used in the U.S. However, there are other countries that use it, countries like Canada, Australia, Russia, and about 60 other countries as of 2004. So by now, there's a whole lot more than that, I'm sure. Will we ever use this system as amateurs? Probably not. Unless you're like me and you work in law enforcement, you probably will never use it. But this information is good to know because it is a digital system. Maybe one day down the road, all the digital systems will be tied together or be able to talk to each other, and it'll be a whole lot better. But as it stands right now, as a ham, you probably won't ever use it. But I thought I'd talk about it. So I guess that about wraps up the training portion of this thing. Let's move on to our Amateur Radio Club Spotlight for this episode. So in today's Amateur Radio Club Spotlight, we're going to be talking about the Mecklenburg Amateur Radio Society. They're located in, I believe it's Mecklenburg County. It's going to be in Charlotte, South Carolina. You can find their website at www.w4bfb. That's William 4, Bravo, Frank, Bravo. Oh man, I just totally butchered that. It's Bravo, Foxtrot, Bravo. They are on Facebook. You can find them at facebook.com/Mecklenburg Amateur Radio Society. And that's MECKLENBURG. Amateur Radio Society. There will be links to their Facebook, their Twitter, their website, all that in the show notes. So you can just go to my website, everythinghamradio.com/podcast/3 to get the notes for this episode, and all the links will be on there. Let's talk about the club a little bit. The history: they were organized in on March 25th, 1949. They had 13 charter members, 12 hams, and 1 non-ham. And unfortunately, as of April 6th, 2013, all of them have become silent keys. The club itself seems to be very active. They do a lot of public service, things like parades and races. They do Skywarn events. They have quarterly VE testing sessions. They have a monthly club newsletter. I read over several of them. There's a lot of information on there. It looks really nice. The editor and anybody else that helps them does a great job. They do contesting like Field Day and several other throughout the year. They also participate in the Charlotte Ham Fest. And one of the things that really blew my mind, I've been a ham now for 20 years, okay? And here, most clubs have a weekly net. Maybe some of them will have um, maybe a bi-weekly net, or they'll have 3 or 4 separate nets on different nights. But this club has a net every single night of the week. They will have a rag chew net Monday through Friday, and then they have several other nets that are on the weekends and on the weekdays, and it kind of blows my mind. That's awesome, the camaraderie that they have, and I hope that the check-ins that they have, you know, allow them to maintain that level, and I'm sure it probably does because they've been a club for a very long time. Um, they have 5 repeaters. They have uh, 3 2-meter repeaters, a 220 repeater, and a 440 repeater. I'm not going to list all of them because we are running short on time, but again, you can go to the show notes and get the frequencies and information about those, or to their website. One of the other things that really surprised me was that they still have a operational packet system in their club. They actually have 9 nodes that are still to this day operational, and a full service bulletin board system. It's that's one of the things that's really gone by the wayside here. With the advent of APRS and the internet, the packet system has really seemed to me to have gone to the wayside, and it's amazing that um, they still have this and still have so many of them. They have several nodes that are connected to the backbone um, uh, with either HF links or to the internet. So that makes it where they can go further out. They can go through the internet, and they actually even have a packet terminal screen on their website. You can go to their website. I think you have to register, and you send an email to their administrator, and he'll actually get you hooked up. He or she will actually get you hooked up to where you can go to their website, and it loads up like a terminal screen, and you can connect to their packet system over the internet. I mean, that's just really neat. So, anyways, that is the Mecklenburg Amateur Radio Society. Really interesting club from the looks of it. They have a lot of pictures that I looked at, a lot of information that I looked at. If I lived in Charlotte, I would probably go to this club. If you're ever around Charlotte, check it out. Maybe you can time it where there's a club meeting or get on one of their nets while you're there. So, anyways, that is the Amateur Radio Club Spotlight for this episode. Thank you bunch. I guess on to the news. So in the news today, we got several things, one of which makes me really happy and excited to be a ham. One of the reasons that I got involved with amateur radio was for community services. Well, as most of you know, back on January 23rd and 24th, there was a massive blizzard that hit the Northeast and dumped in upwards of 3.5 feet of snow. Now, this area of coverage that the snow hit is just absolutely massive, and there was several amateur radio clubs and organizations that volunteered their time to give reports and whatnot. In the New York area, the New York City Long Island section, the section manager there, Jim Mazie, W2KFV, reported approximately 2 feet of snow and some local flooding. All areas members were on standby but active in net operations, with Skywarn also activated. In total, 13 volunteers took part in that area. In the South, in the Appalachian region, may have been probably the hardest hit, with more than 40 inches of snow reported in parts of West Virginia. The Kanawha County Aries activated nets on 75, 40, and 2 meters. We were lucky, said at the ARRL West Virginia section manager Philip Groves, N8SFO. Lots of snow, 24 inches in Beckley, a few power outages around the states. We had several Aries and Races nets on standby, and a lot of hams with nothing to do but talk on the radio, end quote. In Kentucky, which normally is not known for snow emergencies, there were several of the state's southern and eastern counties received more than a foot of snow, stranding thousands of motorists along a 30-mile stretch of I-75. Hazard and Harlan County areas repeaters were activated in Skywarnet on January the 22nd in anticipation of the snow. It remained active for 12 hours until after the snow had passed. Amateur radio volunteers provided 67 storm-related reports to the National Weather Service in Jackson. In Shelby County, Aries team was put on standby to assist with any shelter communications if needed. Thankfully, no activation was necessary, and the Shelby Aries stood down shortly thereafter. In Virginia, the National Weather Service Wakefield office activated their Skywarn amateur radio team, activated on Friday morning through Saturday evening with a brief wrap-up net for storm total snowfall on Sunday morning. The Skywarn desk at National Weather Service Wakefield was not activated. However, there were local nets in 4 of the regions impacted by the snow. Participation exceeded expectations, with 13 Skywarn net controls taking 274 reports from 109 spotters, as told by Crow, who took part in that area's activation. The Wakefield office serves 66 counties and independent cities in southern and southeastern Virginia, northeastern North Carolina, and eastern Maryland. In Stanford County, Virginia, about a dozen ham radio operators were deployed for emergency communications in support of the county emergency manager, but an emergency situation did not develop there. In North Carolina, the storm brought snow and a lot of power outages, with some 200,000 people without power at the peak, but no communications outages. Aries Section Coordinator Tom Brown, N4TAB, reported a few shelters were open, but we subsequently closed them due to minimal need. In Delaware, they received 17 inches of snow. Public service, wireless, and telephone services were operational throughout it. It made a very uneventful Aries activation, according to the ARRL Delaware Section Manager Bill Duveneck, KB3KYH. Amateur radio volunteers began preparing for the storm the day before it hit, firing up a, quote, ready net on Friday evening in Sioux County. The next morning, Aries initiated spot reporting to the County Emergency Operations Center, staffed by Sioux County Races. The Aries storm net opened at noon and stayed up into the evening. Denovex said 34 volunteers participated in this net, reporting weather, downed wires, and traffic accidents. Other Aries volunteers staffed shelters in Georgetown High School, and Aries remained on standby to assist South Delaware Hospital and the Delaware State Police. In Massachusetts, the National Weather Service in Taunton was activated for 16 hours over the weekend. The storm largely affected the areas of south of Boston towards southeast Massachusetts, especially around Cape Cod and the islands, south central Rhode Island, and south central Connecticut. The Nantucket Aries team was on standby to support shelter operations on the island as power outages mounted. Utilities companies were able to restore power quickly and averted the need for the shelter. You know, all this type of volunteerism is something that really hits home for me. It's really awesome to be involved in a hobby where people will donate their time to go out and put themselves in danger, even though, we do our best to stay out of danger. It kind of reminds me of the fire service or volunteer firefighters. They go out and they put their lives in danger for somebody else. That's kind of what this hobby is about for a lot of people, myself included. So kudos to all those who volunteered in the Northeast during this snowstorm. In other news, ARRL President Rick Roderick K5UR has named a new Rocky Mountain Division Vice Director, and that will be former Colorado Section Manager Jeff Ryan, K0RM. Ryan, who is 61, lives in Westminster, Colorado, and is an ARRL Life member. He served in Colorado's top ARRL field organization elective office from 2001 until 2011, when he decided not to run for another term. Allen announced Ryan's appointment over the weekend at the Winterfest in Colorado. Ryan has also served as Assistant Section Manager in Colorado. He is President and Director of the Rocky Mountain Ham Radio, the Director and Co-Chair of HamCon Colorado, the Rocky Mountain Division Convention in Keystone. He also served as Director and Vice Chair of the Colorado Council of Amateur Radio Clubs. Congratulations to Ryan to his appointment to the Rocky Mountain Division Vice Director position. In other news around the ARRL, Tom Gallagher, NY2RF, will succeed David Sumner, K1ZZ, as the ARRL CEO. Tom Gallagher, NY2RF, of West Palm Beach, Florida, will succeed David Sumner as CEO of the ARRL effective April 18th. Gallagher will actually join the ARRL staff as CEO-elect on February 29th, and a transition period will follow. Gallagher was licensed in Pennsylvania in 1966 as WA3GRF, and later N4GRF in North Carolina. Gallagher is a member of the West Palm Beach Amateur Radio Group. He describes himself as, quote, an incurable HFDXer and inverted tinkerer. I probably missaid that, but my bad. And credits his first visit to the Franklin Institute amateur radio station W3TKQ in 1963 for inspiring him to join the amateur radio hobby. He joins the ARRL following 3 decades as an international investment banker and financial services executive. His career has included senior leadership positions with J.P. Morgan Chase and Company and CIBC Oppenheimer and Company in New York, and with Wachovia Capital Markets in Charlotte, North Carolina. He has also served as an adjunct professor at the Walsh School of Foreign Services at Georgetown University and a CEO of the Secondary School Admission Test in Princeton, New Jersey. Gallagher has also served on boards, both public and nonprofit, including 2 NYSE companies, the NPR affiliate in Charlotte, the executive board of the Penn Fund at the University of Pennsylvania, and the International Center of Photography. Gallagher graduated magna cum laude with a BA from the University of Pennsylvania, and he holds a MBA from the Wharton School. In addition to ham radio, Gallagher enjoys saltwater fishing and sailing, which he confesses is sometimes just an excuse to operate Maritime Mobile. So, I would like to welcome Tom Gallagher as our new CEO and wish him the best of luck in his adventures. Hey everybody, once again I'd like to say thank you for listening to this episode of the Everything Ham Radio podcast. If you like what you heard here, head on over to our website. There's lots of information there that I'm sure you're going to love. You can find it at everythinghamradio.com. While you're there, subscribe to get emails on when I publish a new post or a new podcast. You can click on the subscribe button at the top of the page or go there directly at everythinghamradio.com/subscribe. Also, like me on Facebook at facebook.com/everythinghamradio and follow me on Twitter at K5CLM. Also, I would greatly appreciate it if you would subscribe to this podcast, like it, share it with your friends, help me spread the word. So until next time, 73.